And welcome back, one and all. Welcome back to the book club. It's season 2, and we obviously have a new book. I'm TrevimusPrime, and I'm joined by my fellow private investigator who's sitting in a smoke-filled room.
Zerfall.
Hi,
everyone.
Oh, that was the worst. We'll come up with a better intro next time. Anyway, Zerf, what the fuck are we reading?
We are reading Raymond Chandler, The Big Sleep. The Big Sleep is the title, obviously.
It is. This is the first episode. We're always going to try and do slight background information. So this book was originally written in, I want to say, 1934. Oh, let me have a look. Oh, 1939.
There you go.
So this is one of the first books in the Philip Marlowe mystery series. Now, Raymond Chandler did 8 of these damn things, with the first one, The Big Sleep, being made into a film. Not only one film, but 2, because Hollywood's weird like that, and there was only like a 10-year gap between the 2 versions. The first one starring Humphrey Bogart, but I'm sure we'll discuss this in due time. So, what is the genre of the book, my good man?
Oh, this is a hard-boiled detective novel.
How did you describe it to me? Was it something like it's the quintessential basis for nearly all of these sort of things?
Yeah, it's one of the classic detective novels where you know the detective's a hard drinker, down on his luck most of the time, sitting in his office. Some guy comes to the door, he shoots at him. Just misses, but the guy dropped a clue. That sort of thing.
The thing is, it really is as well. You can't actually sort of specify how big of a trope the main character is.
But when you're one of the first ones of it, it doesn't make you the trope. You're just the cookie cutter.
Okay. So, our main character is Philip Marlowe. He's a private investigator who drinks, smokes, and has a way with words.
So, I think part of what shows off the mood of the book is when he just describes himself. Because this is written from the point of view of Marlowe.
It is, yeah.
And he says he was wearing his powder blue suit with dark blue shirt, tie, and display handkerchief. Black brogues. Black wool socks with dark blue clocks on them. Apparently patterned socks were still popular back then. I was neat, clean-shaven, and sober. Neat, clean-shaved, and sober, and I didn't care who knew it. I was everything the well-dressed private detective ought to be. I was calling on $4 million. You hit her here, folks. This guy has $4 million.
Well, this is the
big
joke.
Money.
It's he expects this to be. I mean, even already from that first paragraph, he is setting this up to be his big score. I mean, $4 million in 1930s. I mean, bloody hell, fire!
This guy might pay him $100 a day.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is going to be his big retirement. So already you're getting the impression that not only is this guy probably a good private investigator from the fact that he thinks he's going to get that, but this is where he thinks he's going to be able to call it quits and retire, as we said. Even though, from the fact that he's in 8 other books, it says otherwise.
Yes, and I think it's important because he's talking about how well cleaned up he is, and it doesn't tell you, but it tells you that normally he's not a very cleaned up individual.
No, sure. So I mean, you got to sort of wonder, well, okay, is he down on his luck then instead?
That's the way I picture it, but I mean that might just be because that's the way private detectives normally are portrayed.
Yeah, sure. What, sort of like dingy office,
yeah.
Bottle of bourbon sitting on the desk, smoke filled. Oh, hang on, this is just the 1930s in general. I've seen Mad Men.
How did everyone down on their luck afford so much bourbon?
Cheap. I mean,
it was before alcohol taxes.
It's just everything's so cheap. Although I'm going to actually say this now, and maybe this is the wrong time to see it. In the chapters I've read, the only thing he ever drinks is alcohol. I've never actually read anything about him eating, and the only other thing he does is smoke.
And he smokes a lot.
He does smoke a lot.
Even for the 1930s.
He does. So anyway, past that first paragraph, basically, as I said before, The rest of this section is basically discussing the Sternwood Manor, and Sternwood is the name of the general and his sort of family. Raymond Chandler's descriptions, compared to Neuromancer, this is incredibly easy to read.
Yeah.
Even though the language is slightly different than what we're used to, and only slightly, he doesn't need to say much to convey what's actually happening.
And I really like his... there were more innuendos than I perhaps expected, but they're a lot more subtle, or at least maybe not more subtle, but they're less crude than innuendos you'd normally find in today's novels.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, in the first page, the character becomes just instantly likable as well. That first joke about the statues, I know it's a bit daft, but that actually just did it for me. Like, okay, this guy's good.
Yeah.
So, essentially, he's been called to the Sternwood Manor to, say, accept a job from the general. The general is in ill health, he's dying, he's a guy that's barely hanging on, and the general has 2 daughters. One who is a bit of a ditz, a bit of an airhead, and the other who is this strong, independent woman that doesn't exactly like to be told what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now, the job. The general is being blackmailed, and this is not the first time he's been blackmailed, but this time he's been blackmailed with reference to his youngest daughter, who Philip Marlowe meets before meeting the general, and pretty much it's summed up with her first line being, "Tall, aren't you?" And he says, "I don't mean to be." Her eyes rounded. She was puzzled. She was thinking. I could see, even on the short acquaintance, that thinking was always going to be a bother to her. Brilliant.
Yes. And she's all over this guy.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, what's your name? Riley. Doghouse Riley. That's a funny name. But she's actually, even this in First Encounter, she's basically giving him puppy dog eyes, and, I mean, it says, then she lowered her lashes until they almost cuddled her cheeks and slowly raised them again, like a theatre curtain. Oh, dear. That was supposed to make me roll over on my back with all 4 paws in the air. So instantly, it's like, oh, a man. Hello.
Yeah.
It's like,
it's good too, because you can tell he's making fun of her the whole time. And then she even says to her, she says to him, "You're making fun of me." And he goes, "Uh-huh." And she goes, "What?"
It's great because he's this bloke that's obviously, he's got the job at hand, but he knows not to get involved with, I mean, A, because it's the client's daughter, and B, because she is an absolute bloody idiot. I mean, completely. "You're cute," she giggles. "I'm cute too." It's like, what? You know what, the thing is, I said this to you before we started recording, actually saying what happens in these chapters is going to be quite hard because, for example, chapters link together quite heavily.
Mm-hmm.
They're very short, and the first 3 chapters are basically about this setting the scene. A load of the stuff I've talked about doesn't happen until chapter 2 and 3. The end of chapter 1, he doesn't even meet the general yet.
No, he's, right after that line you said, he doesn't even reply to her. He just is like, "Well, I'm done." And the butler takes the cue and just shows up. "Hey, what's up? This way to the general."
Yeah, and then as soon as she sees the butler, she scurries off. But I like one of his last line of the chapters is, it's, "You ought to wean her. She looks old enough." He looked at me with great politeness and repeated what he had said. "Miss Carmen Sturwood." Yes. So, I mean, first impressions, really, I like this. It's well written, the character's likeable, it's funny, it's not too hard to read, the chapters are short, and I think it's going to be, just from looking at this, I think it's going to be an easy to understand story, but entertaining at the same time.
Yeah. And I think it kind of speaks volumes that we were trying to talk about how many chapters we should talk about. With Neuromancer, we said, okay, we'll read chapter 1, we'll talk about chapter 1, and then we'll move on. And then we said that about this book too. We said, we'll read chapter 1, we'll talk about chapter 1, and then we'll move on. And then the next time we talked about it, we had both read past chapter 1. So we said, okay, chapter 3, and then we both read past chapter 3.
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem with as I say, the book seems to be in sections. The first 3 chapters are just your introduction to the case and the main characters, whereas chapters 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are like another chunk of the story. So I think we're just going to have to wing it, to be honest. So if anyone is actually wanting to read this at home, a lot of the time when we've done the book club in the past, people listen to it afterward, like quite a long time afterwards. So I'm not exactly expecting anyone to actually read it with us, but if you do plan to, good luck, because we will not probably try and stick to any sort of bloody pattern. Okay. So, as I say, chapter 2, he finally meets the general in some sort of, now I want to say arboretum, am I going the wrong word? Do I actually want to say greenhouse?
I think it is a greenhouse.
Full of orchids, if I'm correct.
Yeah, the horrible smell of orchids.
Doesn't it compare it to flesh?
Let's see.
Oh, I don't know.
I can't remember exactly for that one.
But I mean, the thing is, he meets. So Chandler takes great sort of effort into describing even something as simple as this greenhouse, and then the next thing, it's sort of like the first thing he really says to Marlowe when he meets him is, "Do you want a brandy?" It's like, "How do you take it? Any way at all?" Yeah.
And it was sort of like the general's. I think that was the general just judging him right then and there. Would you take a brandy? If he says no, he's like, I don't know if this is the guy I want.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same way. Like, Marlowe goes to actually light up a cigarette, and the general's like, no, you can smoke. I like the smell of tobacco. That instantly, these two are at ease. I don't know if that's the right thing to say. And it's sort of like, I think the general respects him. Well, there's instant respect from between both of them.
Yeah, I think that Marlowe may have been expecting him to be more of a stuffy guy.
Yeah, and he's pretty on the level, because again, the guy is, well, he's pretty much near the end, isn't he, really? You are looking at a very dull survival of a rather gaudy life. A cripple paralysed in both legs, and with only half his lower body. There's very little I can eat, and my sleep is so close to waking that it's hardly worth the name. I seem to exist largely on heat, like a newborn spider, and the orchids are an excuse for the heat.
And the general also finds them to be nasty things. Actually, that's where your comparison to flesh was too. So
anyway, let's try and compartmentalize this a bit, because it is just one sort of big thing. He talks about, so the general basically gives him a bit of backstory. He talks about his daughters. He talks about his eldest daughter being married to a guy called Rusty Reagan, who mysteriously disappeared, and they got on. He's probably going to be a big plot element. I don't know. I haven't hit him yet, and I don't think you have you?
Nope.
So, yeah, he's an Irishman.
An ex-bootlegger. He had been an officer in the IRA, and he wasn't even legally in the United States.
So he talks about the fact he's been blackmailed again. And I'm trying to find it. It's this blackmail note, it's not written out. It doesn't say, oh, we have this information on you, you owe us this money, etc., pay up. It's sort of like just a loan card where it says amount due, and then I think it's something like a reason, and then it lists his daughter's name, Carmen. Here we go. On demand, I promise to pay to Arthur Gwynn Geiger or order the sum of $1,000 without interest. Value received, Carmen Sternwood.
Yeah.
Now, did I read that wrong, or was that literally just the that is just the ransom, well, not the ransom note, that's just the blackmail note, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's a pretty threatening one at that, if you think about it.
Yeah, and the fact that when they talk about, so who's this Geiger, he says he has no idea. So whoever's blackmailing him is just, he's got something on him, but he doesn't quite know what. The fact that he hasn't talked to his daughters about it, he hasn't talked about the police about it. Essentially, he basically talks about Marlowe just sorting it. Oh, hang on, it also mentions about how his daughters were educated. a bit more background. And essentially what we said, that she, like, his youngest daughter, Carmen, is a bit of an airhead, and again, the older one's this well-educated snob.
Yeah.
It is a very hard book to try and...
To sum up real quick.
It really is. Because, I mean, literally, I'm turning pages as we do this to try and keep track of what happened. I mean, it's not like Neuromancer where you can sit down and you're like, oh, what about this and this and this? It's more simple, and I guess we're going to have to maybe concentrate a little bit more on the language used.
So, so far, I've liked most of the characters so far. Not necessarily as people, but as characters.
There are a lot of stereotypes.
Yes.
Which I like. Again, this is really simple writing, and I think after coming off Neuromancer, I'm bloody thankful. You know.
But this general, I like the general. I think that he's I mean, he's obviously holding a little bit back, but he's pretty much like, I don't care anymore. This is what things are like. Yeah, this is what my daughter's like. Yeah, I haven't talked to Carmen about it. If I asked her, she would just suck her thumb and look coy. Like, he's not trying to pretend like she's better than she is and all that sort of stuff.
No, he's not. I mean, do you actually think he is hiding something?
Well, I don't. He might be holding something back. Like, he may know a little more about who this guy is, even though he says he hasn't the faintest idea.
Yeah, I mean, especially considering this is the second time he's been blackmailed.
Mm.
Oh god, I can't talk about it because obviously there is stuff that happens which you haven't read yet. It's like, no, it's really good.
And I think it's funny too, because the only reason why he's not paying off the blackmailer when it's such a small amount of money is pride.
So Geiger can collect on these notes unless you can show fraud. So it's essentially a case of this guy's calling you out and saying you owe him money. Unless you can say, no, I don't, and have proof. Do you see what I'm trying to... Am I trying to say? Yeah, you get what I'm trying to say. And then they also mention about the last guy he paid money to, which is Joe Brody, who was $5,000. But again, all it says is he was some kind of gambler, but he doesn't seem to know why exactly he paid him.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, maybe the general's not quite there.
Yeah.
Or again, he's either not quite there, or you're right, he is completely holding things back.
And it's funny because he says Norris would know my butler about this Joe Brody, but I don't recall him actually asking.
No, and I do wonder if that's something that's going to come back later. Again, this is the...
There might be some red herrings. Those are another trope that were pretty new at this time.
We need, next time we do this, we need to have read exactly the same points. Because I know stuff you don't, and it's winding me the fuck up. It really is. Yeah, the fact that his daughters have their own money, so it can't, whatever these blackmailer things are.
Well, they talk about their expenses, and then he's pretty much done with them.
Yeah, I mean, what is it?
The butler hates him for some reason.
Yeah, I was going to say, can I make a deal with this guy that I think he's within hooting distance of being on the level? So if this guy's actually legit and you do somehow owe him money, is it alright if I just pay him off? And it's like, yes, the matter's now in your hands.
Mm-hmm.
But then he follows that up with, I'll take him out. He'll think a bridge has fell on him. So, I mean, he actually does this, because one minute Marlowe's saying, yeah, I'd pay him off, and the next minute he's going, no, don't pay him off. And it's like some cogs are whirring in his head, and every time he gets a bit more information, he's adapting what he's going to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's switching back and forth. He's saying if you pay him off this one time, what's going to stop him from just coming back over and over again?
I mean, is there anything else we really need to talk about on Chapter 2?
I think that's it for Chapter 2. We've been introduced a little more to how Marlowe acts towards people and everything, and towards his job. And we know what the general's all about, and we know that the butler doesn't like him. Every time he tries to make a little joke with him or anything, he just shuts him down.
It's done the general thought process, which is quite nice, and it does set the scene quite nicely. We now have the main character established, we have the job established. But Chapter 3 is quite interesting, because you'd assume that that's it just there. But then he meets the oldest daughter.
Mm-hmm. And she asks to see him.
Yeah, because basically the oldest daughter assumes that Marlowe's been hired to find her husband that's disappeared. And then again, did we already mention the quote you made?
I don't think we did.
Your quote from this chapter was... Or do you want me to read it?
If you found it, you can read it,
I have.
I'm not on the right page.
So you're a private investigator, she said. I didn't know they really existed, except in books. Or else they were greasy little men snooping around hotels. It is a book!
That's what makes it so good.
Oh, God, so we did it in unison as well.
And do you know what the thing is? I honestly wasn't expecting a line like that from such an old book. I didn't think they broke the fourth wall like that.
Which is really weird. Not only is he breaking the fourth wall, but again, going back to Neuromancer, and this is probably the only episode we're going to refer to that, whereas William Gibson had to spend all this time describing things, this doesn't have to. So basically, it can concentrate on character interaction rather than trying to set scenes. I mean, he does do descriptions, but because if he says, "Oh, that's a Persian rug," he doesn't need to go into lots of detail. You know what it is. Even like, it's 80. Is it 80 years ago? This was done.
Roughly.
Yeah. So even almost around that time frame, we still know what he's on about. Which is then you look at something that was written in 1984, which was Neuromancer, and you go, okay, there's a massive bit of difference there. And I think that's another reason why this book is so bloody easy to read. And this has my favourite line in it at the moment. She basically talks to him and says, "Oh, you know, has he talked to you about the police? Has he done this, and this?" And
Marlowe's playing.
Got it.
Not playing ball, I should say.
Yeah.
He's pretty much asking her questions about everything that she asks him, or just says like, "Oh, yes and no."
She turns around to him and says, "And I don't like your manners." And then he responds, and I like this, "I'm not crazy about yours," I said. "I didn't ask to see you, you sent them me. I don't mind you ritzing me or drinking your lunch out of a scotch bottle. I don't mind me showing you your legs. They're very swell legs, and it's a pleasure to make their acquaintance. I don't mind if you don't like my manners. They're pretty bad. I breathe over them during the long winter evenings, but don't waste your time trying to cross-examine me."
Yes. He doesn't take any shit from anybody.
He's so well written. Oh my! I mean, it makes Case look like a paper plate. Just in comparison.
And this is the one thing is the way the women are written in this are very typical of the time.
They are, yeah.
I think because what happens is when he says that to her, she slams her glass down really mad, slops some of the booze on her cushion, swings her legs to the floor, stood up. She's got fire in her eyes and her nostrils are wide. And she looks at him. Her knuckles, her fists are and she got her fists balled up. Her knuckles are white.
Yeah.
And she says, "People don't talk to me like that." And then she calms down a little bit and says, "My God, you big, dark, handsome brute. I ought to throw a Buick at you." It's like, oh, that's all so handsome. It makes me angry.
I don't think we're going to find a strong female character in this book, are we?
And this is what passes for the independent female in this time period, which says a lot about the time period.
I mean, I'm hoping we're wrong, but yeah, this is going to be But I mean, the thing is, we don't really need a strong female because this is the Philip Marlowe show, and we can forgive it because of it's a period novel, really.
Yes, This isn't some sort of steampunk thing where things are different in the Victorian era than they actually were.
Yeah. I mean, she actually follows this up with a line, "I loathe masterful men. I simply loathe them."
So anyway, she gets mad. She tells him to get out. She stands up. "Sit down," she snaps. He sat down.
Oh no, see then, it's the bit after what you've just said. She goes, please, you could find Rusty if Dad wanted you to." It's like she's flip-flopping between I am an independent, strong woman but oh my God, I need you, you handsome brute. And
she kind of realizes that he doesn't actually know much about Rusty, and that that's not what he's after at all. And she's and she's very disappointed when she finds out that he's not looking for Rusty.
Yeah, I think that's going to incorporate into it quite heavily at some point, though.
Mhm.
I think the Rusty character will. I mean, obviously, he hasn't as of yet where I've read up to, but I would assume
Well, I don't think
so.
they build him up so much and then never see him again.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you could argue, is that a good thing? That automatically you go, nah, we'll see him later.
Mm.
You know, although, to be honest, these first 3 chapters really don't set you up for what's going to happen. It really doesn't. It gets so weird.
And eventually she finds out he's not looking for him, and she's very disappointed, and she's pretty much just done talking to him at that point. And he goes back down the stairs and runs into the butler and says, "You made a mistake. Mrs. Regan didn't want to see me."
Yeah. I'm sorry, sir. I make many mistakes.
Yep, they're just like, okay, that was it. Let's pretend it didn't happen.
Now, the thing is, the rest of this chapter, we've got no more dialogue, and it's all descriptions.
Yeah.
But again, it's really well described. Where is it? Thunder was crackling in the foothills now, and the sky above them was purple-black. It was going to rain hard. The air had a damp foretaste of rain. I put the top up of my convertible before I started downtown. It's done in such a way that it's slightly poetic, but again, really simple.
Well, and I think the thing is too is the way he words it. Everyone can picture that because we've all been there. We've all been out right before it rains, and we know what it gets like. And he describes it better than we would normally describe it ourselves.
I've got to wonder about this. Okay, so it's 1939. Are we going for the fact of he wanted to make this book as wide-ranging as possible? Like, he wanted anyone to be able to pick up and read it. I mean, we are talking a time where education wasn't as prevalent. Like, the level of education wasn't prevalent, and a lot of people still couldn't actually read and write.
Well, from what I understand, he originally used to write for magazines and stuff like that. And that when he first got back into novels, he reused a lot of the stuff that was written for the pulp magazines.
Okay, so you think his time, it's all that sort of simplified writing style carried over?
I think so. And I think because, and I mean, that is obviously going to reach a wider audience because it's the type of thing that anyone that cared enough about reading per se. I don't want to sound horrible, but there were people back then that were, I don't know how to read and I don't want to know how to read. I don't need to.
Well, right? There are still some people like that.
There are still some people like that. But there were a lot more than back then. But the people that did care to read could pick up a book like this, and even if their reading level wasn't necessarily that of a scholar, they would probably still enjoy it.
Raymond Chandler is actually really good at writing believable conversations.
I think that works, yeah. He is.
Yeah. And again, another good quote. She had lovely legs. I would say that for her.
What's actually, I think, the best part about that line is, he says, she had lovely legs. I would say that for her. They were a couple of pretty smooth citizens. She and her father.
Yeah.
When I first started reading that second line, I was like, is he describing her legs as smooth citizens? And I think that was part of that. I think that was done on purpose.
Do you reckon that's a fourth wall breaker? So it's like he's imagining, it's all like he's just talking to himself, and then he realizes you're listening in. So it's all like, she had lovely legs. I would say that for her. They were a couple of pretty smooth citizens. She and her father. Yeah. You know what? I wouldn't actually put that outside the realms of possibility because of the way it's written.
The other thing about it is that this is he's sort of a down on his luck type of guy. It seems he has a freaking convertible. Man.
See, is he down on his luck, though?
Well, I don't know for sure, but I feel like there wasn't a whole lot of money in private eyeing back then.
No. I mean, the thing is, the chapter ends with basically Geiger. Turns out he's got a bookshop. So he basically sits down and goes, right, I'm going to go to the library and research first editions. And this all becomes part of the play that he's going to employ in the next chapter.
Yeah. And you know what? I honestly think something that's way better about this than about Neuromancer. Well, I mean, part of it's how Neuromancer is, and it does play well to the thing. If something like that happened to Case, he would have been like, oh, and get a Hitachi or whatever it was. Hey, look up rare books and tell me something about them later. And then he would go do something else, and then 2 paragraphs later, his Hitachi would go, beep, beep. Rare books are something people used to read, and they're very expensive because there aren't very many of them. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do.
It's.
I mean, I promise this is the last time we're going to refer to Neuromancer. Continue.
I think it brings you back to the time frame of what time period you're in, especially when he says, "I'm going to go to the library and do some research." Because when was the last time somebody was like, "I'm going to go to the library and do some research"?
It's actually nice to be rooted in reality for once. You know what I mean? Especially with a lot of the books I read, it's so far-fetched and farcical, whereas this is down to earth. I would also like to sort of make this sort of case that Neuromancer was a very situation book. And what I mean by that was it's very heavy on the describing of what's going on in a particular environment, where this, in comparison, is a very character-orientated book. You can actually take these characters and slot them to any bloody setting, and it would still probably work.
Yeah.
So that you could put them in a steampunk setting. You could put them perhaps in a fantasy setting.
It's like a classic Romeo and Juliet. They write that thing for every single time someone comes out with a new genre, they write Romeo and Juliet for it. Right? The characters are characters.
Yeah, no, I completely get what you mean. And this is, again, one of those sort of things. And I know I keep rattling on about it, but bloody hell, well done. Very good choice.
Well, we all have my brother to thank for that.
We do indeed. So, closing statement on the beginning of this book.
This book has me hungry for more. The first 3 chapters made me want to read more. I read the 4th chapter, even though we were only supposed to read the first 3. Some people read up to chapter 10.
We did, well.
and it does that. It's one of those. I mean, I think the short chapters help with that. Like, he gets things moving along pretty well.
It's not going to take as long to deck through this at all.
No.
Now, the thing I would say, what I want to try and do is we're going to refer to sections of chapters by like subtitles. So in terms of these first 3, introduction.
Yeah.
4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, I want to refer to as the Geiger set. And that will all, I mean...
That'll make sense once you've read all the way through 8.
Those chapters are pretty much all based around the guy blackmailing. And then I'm pretty sure, because it's done in such a way that it is sectioned quite nicely.
And I think that's, if anyone is actually reading along, I think that's how we're going to do things. Every time it seems like a logical break in the story, in the scene, because that first bit was pretty much a scene, right? That if you were watching a movie, that's one of the things that would go down, and then it would have, especially if it was an old movie, there'd be some sort of really crappy wipe, and then you'd be at the next scene.
So, I mean, it helps as well, because it means we can refer back to, like, oh yeah, we're on about the Geiger section, or we're on about, I don't know, the section where he saves a load of cats from a tree. That might be a couple of chapters, I don't know, depends how many cats are in said tree. But, you know, that's probably how we'll try and work it. Yeah, so I'm happy with that. Are you happy?
I'm happy.
Alright then, ladies and gentlemen, that was the first part of The Big Sleep, and next time, I think, as I said, we will do 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8.
Sounds good.
Maybe 9 and 10. It'll all make sense when you hit it. I think the thing is, I don't want to leave certain chapters on cliffhangers, especially as they have been compartmentalized. It's almost like this book has actually been written...
as a serialness?
Yeah, so I mean, this actually lends into the fact of what you said, that, oh yeah, he used to do stuff in magazines. So he's actually structured it in a way like, yeah, so you'd have these concise parts.
Now, when you write for magazines, you have to make it so that the readers want more of your stories so that the publisher has to pay you again.
A bit of background into magazines with Zerfall. So anyway, that was the first one. We will get back into the groove of this properly next time. Sorry this is a bit of a shorter episode than usual. We'll try and create a 3-hour epic for you next time. So, I've been TrevimusPrime.
I'm Zerfall.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.